This interview was recorded at the 2012 SVS annual meeting in Washington, D.C.
The Society for Vascular Surgery has recently decided to sponsor a series of audiovisual interviews of the leaders whose contributions have led to the evolution of vascular surgery to its current recognized subspecialty status. A committee was formed called the History Project Work Group to undertake this project. This was chaired by Dr. Jimmy Yale, with Norm Rich and myself as members. Cal Ernst acted as consultant. Younger members were then added: Bill Baker, Mark Eskandari, Melina Kibbe, Peter Lawrence, and Walt McCarthy. My name is Roger Gregory, and today I will be interviewing Dr. Tom Riles. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Tom.
Well, Roger, thank you very much. It's an honor to be invited to be interviewed.
Let's start this journey with your early days of how a young man from Missouri ends up in New York City. This is incredible. You were born in 1943?
That's correct, yeah.
Where were you born?
Born in St. Joe, Missouri.
Big town, small town?
Well, it's a pretty good-sized town. The St. Joe is probably best known for being the stepping-off place of the Pony Express many years ago. But at that time, it was bigger than Kansas City, but soon got overshadowed by Kansas City.
And your parents, tell me about them.
My dad was an osteopathic surgeon. He went to Kirksville School in Missouri, and he met my mother, who was a farm girl from Missouri, going to teacher school there. So that's how I ended up in Missouri.
I know your father was quite an influence. How about your mother?
Very much. She was the one that was always organized and thought about things a lot and made sure that the children did the right thing. My dad was more of a free spirit, I guess, but much more spontaneous and innovative.
Now, for your education, for grammar school, did you go to public school or did you go to private school?
Public school all the way through. Actually, Roger, my family moved down to Florida when I was 8 years of age. And for the next 10 years, I went to school in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and graduated Fort Lauderdale High School. And at that point, they moved back to Missouri almost the day after my graduation, waiting for me to graduate. And from that point on, I went on to schools and only got back to Missouri or Florida for vacations.
And you decided, when you were in high school, what exactly were your interests and what were you thinking about?
Well, I was thinking about medicine at the time, but I really didn't know. But it certainly was an influence on my life. I had been invited to the operating room at age 13 by my dad and would often be around him, so I knew quite a bit about it.
He was a general surgeon?
General surgeon, right? And a real general surgeon. He did hips, prostates, breasts, thyroids, stomachs, you name it, all those things.
Why did you think about going to college?
Well, I think it was always expected I'd go to college, but I don't think there would have been any question from my parents' point of view about me not going to college.
Yeah, for college, you go to Stanford.
Well, that was a big reach. Imagine going from Fort Lauderdale out to California.
Wow.
In those days, you didn't go shopping around for colleges. My brother-in-law had gone to Stanford, and he was a big influence and talked me into going out there. And I got a scholarship to go out there, too. So without ever knowing where it was, and in fact, very few people down Florida even knew where Stanford was either. They thought it was some little town up in Connecticut somewhere. At that time, it was a regional school more than it is now. But that shipped me off and went out there, and it was a great adventure.
Was this a good time?
It was a great time. I think that experience at Stanford had a huge influence on my life, and I really am grateful to have been out there.
Now you end up with a BS in biology, and by this time why have you decided on going to med school now?
Well, again, I think that a lot of it was the influence of my family. During that time, I thought a bit about business school and whatnot, and I just realized that I couldn't do a lot of those other things. I wasn't good at anything else, so ended up saying, well, medicine should be all right.
First we go from Missouri to Florida to California and now Texas. How did Baylor get into this?
Well, that was another thing. A fellow that had been senior to me, actually also from Missouri, and later on became a pretty prominent plastic surgeon. He had gone down to Baylor a year or two before, and he called me up and he said, "Tom, you got to come down here. It's this really exciting place." And as you know, Roger, that was a tremendously exciting place, and it sounded like it'd be a good place for me to go.
That was an explosive time.
Absolutely.
In surgery. So you stayed at Baylor for a rotating internship?
I did.
Why not surgery?
Well, at that time I really wasn't sure. In fact, again, it sounded like I changed things pretty often, and I did. I was going to be a urologist. I had written my papers as a medical student in urology, and under the influence of one of the nice urologists there. And I was excited about that, so it was just a matter of doing the internship, and then I was going to do urology afterwards. As you recall, at that time, you often separated your internship from the residency program.
But now you decide in 1970 to go to NYU. What is this all about?
Well, that was another decision that I got married that summer after my internship to Adriana, and I had one more year of general surgery to do. And as you remember, Roger, being a second-year general surgery resident at Baylor had some downsides.
Rough.
Very rough. It was a minimum of 3 months locked up into Dr. DeBakey's ICU. And if you were really good, I mean, some other fellow got fired, but you were hung around, you got to take his shift. It might have been 6 months, so that was the prize. And getting married, it just didn't seem like that was really necessary for me to go on into urology. So we decided to get out of town and do something fun, and I found a residency for a year up in New York. Also, I knew I was going to be going into the Navy afterwards, so it wasn't so imperative.
Was this because of the Berry plan?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you go in the Navy as a medical officer, and now here you are on a submarine. How did that happen?
Well, at that time, of course, the military is always a pretty good thing for us doctors.
Yeah.
And again, because of my brother-in-law, who was a Marine officer, I thought it would really be great to be assigned to the Marines. 1971, when I went into the Navy, the Marines had already been pulled out of Vietnam, and they were mostly stationed in Okinawa. The thing was, I would have to go to Okinawa, not with my wife, and it didn't sound like that was going to be very educational for me. So the only way you could really control where you might be would be to volunteer for something like the submarine service. I said, sure, this sounds good. So I signed up for the submarine service.
Was this a good experience or a bad experience?
Oh, wonderful. I had so much fun with them that they were wonderful officers. I often think about the officers in the submarine. They were as exciting as all of the residents were in medicine. You know, all these young guys controlling this huge ship, nuclear reactor, 50 nuclear weapons, missiles, guidance systems and whatnot. And at age 27, there were, out of the 140 men, there were only 10 of them that were older than I was.
Wow. But you weren't doing a lot of general surgery there.
No, that's right. Very, very little medicine. So I served as diving officer, and you're the radiation officer aboard the boat too.
Now you told me about getting married early in your training, and you've had 2 children now.
We have.
Evan and Eric.
Right.
Are they involved in medicine now, Tom?
Yeah, they are. The younger one is, Eric. In fact, he just finished 3 years of internal medicine at University of Michigan.
Terrific.
And as we speak, he's on his way to Boston to do a cardiology fellowship. So he's kind of gone to the dark side here.
Well, I started to say. And Evan?
Evan is in business. He works for Thomson Reuters, and he is lived all over the world with them, but right now he's actually living in Denver, and he and his lovely wife have produced our first grandchild.
Terrific. This will be a good time for
Yeah.
you. Now, you completed your surgery training in NYU from 1973 to 76, and now you decide on vascular surgery. How did that happen, Tom?
Well, I always liked vascular. I must say, even when I was down in Houston, that I thought it was exciting. Mm-hmm. And the idea that you could fix something, pretty dramatically. I thought it was great. Tony Imperato was a huge influence. I admired him tremendously. I thought he was a wonderful surgeon and had great principles, which I thought he'd be great as a teacher.
Was he?
Absolutely, absolutely.
When you finished, you decided to stay at NYU. Why did you elect to go into academic medicine instead of private practice?
I had written a few papers during that time, and I really liked it. I thought it was a great opportunity. Also, be perfectly honest, I thought, well, I'll spend a couple of years in New York working with Dr. Imperato, and certainly that would enhance my education.
Who could stay in New York forever, right?
There are many times, I'd say probably up at about my 20th year in New York, I kept thinking, well, another year, and never got away.
By 1991, you were chief of vascular surgery. And by 2001, you were professor of surgery. So things seemed to move along very well.
They did, and I was very lucky to be in a great place and also to have the support of Dr. Frank Spencer, who was a tremendous influence on me as well.
During this time, you assumed several administrative positions. From 2001 to 2006, chairman of the Department of Surgery.
That's correct.
So this was more than just chief of vascular. You were
Right.
chairman of the department. Was this something you wanted to do, Tom, or?
Not at first. Dr. Spencer had stepped down, and a search had gone on at NYU for over 2 years. And for one reason or another, a lot of candidates were not interested in the job, or we couldn't recruit them to NYU. In fact, I had been part of the search committee and hadn't put my hat in the ring. And I was concerned, to tell you the truth, that the department was just floundering without leadership at that point. And so I decided that I would put my hat in the ring and was asked to take it over. And it seemed at that time that NYU's Department of Surgery needed some major structural changes. What I mean by that is that everybody was basically in private practice and there was no financial infrastructure to the department. And so one of my tasks during those 5 years was to get all that straightened out, get it on a sound financial basis, and get some of the research going and so forth.
Did you find this an easy thing to do or hard to do? Or?
I would say it was, administratively, it was not easy at all because it's like herding cats, as you know, that everybody wanted to keep their independence, and it was somewhat difficult, but a challenge. I'm glad I did it.
In 2006 until the current time, you became associate dean, and in 2010 became director of the Simulation Center, which we'll come back to later. But as you know, we were fortunate enough to have a tour of the Simulation Center, and it was absolutely stunning.
Great.
And we'll get back to talk about that more in just a moment. Tom, I'd like to talk now about several focus areas in your career that were, at least in my estimation, real highlights. Mm-hmm. The first was the merger of the vascular societies. That is, the merger of SVS and the North American chapter of the ISCVS. Why did you embark on this, and why, and what role did you play?
Well, that's a long history, and you remember a lot of it. There was a period of time when those two societies were essentially, their only duty was to arrange for a meeting once a year. And they were very honorary societies and had a nice meeting, and that was about it. But as you remember, in the 90s, things started changing for vascular surgery. Right. The interventional radiologists were cutting into our area, cardiologists were starting to cut into our area. That whole issue about general surgery, where we fit with them. At that point, I was actually serving as a secretary for the International Society for Cardiovascular Surgery. And there started to develop conflict, as you recall, between the officers of the two societies, which is kind of ridiculous because it was sort of random as who was going to be officer of what society. We were members of both societies, but if you were in international, then boy, you defended their turf, and if you were in Society of Vascular Surgery, you had to defend their turf, and a lot of it I thought was kind of ridiculous. But
So you had to assume a role as more of a diplomat.
that was it. I had 4 presidents, which I served as secretary. Bob Hobson and John Porter and several others. So it was kind of an interesting time. But those conflicts became really a problem, and some of them were really bitter conflicts. The problem was that as we were starting to have these external forces impact upon vascular surgery, we had to change. The International Society of Vascular Surgery started to initiate change and did very well. We changed our name. We became the American Association for Vascular Surgery. We changed the membership requirements, so rather than being an exclusive group, we wanted to be an inclusive group. We initiated the Political Action Committee to start to work with us. We initiated the screening program as a public service. We had done quite a few things that I think were very good. But the trouble was, as that society became stronger, the Society for Vascular Surgery, which is a much more prestigious group, but very small, only 250 people, felt that they should be in charge of this political activity. On the other hand, it didn't make too much sense. How could you only have 250 members and represent all of vascular surgery? So that was the basis of the conflict, and we had to make a change.
How do you think it worked out?
I think it's great. I think it was great, and actually, as we speak here, it was almost 10 years ago to the day that 6 of us got into a room. Actually, we had dinner, and it was Jack Cronowet and myself and the 2 secretaries and the 2 president-elects were there. And we had had a pretty bruising day with this back and forth, and we also had a couple of drinks and began to talk about it and said, you know, this is not the way to go. And we decided at that dinner that we were going to make a move to try to merge the societies. The idea had been around before. John Porter had brought it up a couple of years before, and it was pretty soundly defeated. That people thought it was a crazy idea. But those of us who were involved in this realized that we had to make a change.
Do you think the merger harmed international exchange?
No, I don't think so at all. In fact, I think it's helped in so many ways, because once you got rid of the conflict and everybody could focus all of their energies on the real problems, that whether it was international or political action or fundraising or career development. I mean, some of the programs that have come about to help us embrace endovascular surgery really were sponsored by the societies, as you recall. So many good things have come out of it.
You mentioned the Political Action Committee. Of all the SVS committees, the Political Action Committee is thought by most to be one of the most influential and effective committees. Some of the things that Political Action Committee was able to do was, which you know very well, is screening for abdominal aneurysms very effectively. Averted Medicare cuts for physicians. Non-invasive tests were kept exempt from the Deficit Reduction Act. Averted additional cuts in medical care. Raised $100,000 annually to support these activities. How did you get involved, Tom? Was it just through the 2 societies, or?
Well, to tell you the truth, Bob Zwolek gets all the credit for the initial work on that. He was the one who was there going to Washington and everything. But it became clear that we needed money from our membership to fight those battles. So he really came to me when I was the president-elect and later as president, said, hey, we ought to have a political action committee. And 2 of us got a lawyer in Washington here and found out what to do and formed it and raised the first chunk of money, and that's how we got going. So that was my part of it, was really more on the organizational part of it. Bob really takes credit for the ideas of all those accomplishments you talk about.
Tom, do you really believe that SVS can impact U.S. medical care?
Well, you just gave a good listing of how it can, and so I think that it has, and needs to continue to be in the game. I know we're small, but the alternative is that you're not in the game at all. And you have to be out there. So,
now that U.S. medical care has become such a political football,
right.
many believe we've lost our way. Do you think that's true?
You're talking about vascular surgery or
Yes.
about in medicine in general?
Both.
Both. Well, I don't know. When you go back to my father, I remember when I was thinking about going into medicine as a high school student, Medicare was coming online, and there were a lot of doctors going around and saying, oh, the sky's going to fall, and this is the worst thing in the world, and talking me out of going into medicine. So I think it's just an evolution. It's going to be another set of battles, but things are changing. It's going to be the challenges of the day. So I don't think we've lost our way. I think it's just a new day.
You think we're overmatched in Washington?
Oh, of course, but sure we are. Sure we are, but you do what you can.
How can we level the playing field and bring the politician into the operating room?
I think that that's never going to happen, but I think our real influence is always going to be with the public. And in many ways, I wish that we spent more time cultivating our image with the public and leveraging that. One of the things that's helped us over these years is that despite a list of things somebody could say are negative about medicine, is that still most patients have great faith in their doctor. And I think it's wonderful, and we need to keep that up, because that relationship with the doctor and patient is really ultimately our only strength.
Tom, it's always been a absolutely forbidden area of medicine to consider marketing. Are you saying we should think more about marketing?
Well, I'm not sure marketing is the word, but I think that there are ways that doctors can be involved and show their compassion and good feelings for our problems in our country. Financial problems is certainly one of them. Again, I say years ago, and it bothers me a bit about this, in my father's generation and others, there was an obligation to take care of the poor people in this country. And you did it. That was part of being a doctor. Right. You took care of everybody, and those that could pay did. Those that could not, you took care of them anyway. I think after the government got into it, the attitude a little bit has changed quite a bit, and it's more like, well, why am I going to do that if I'm not going to get paid for it? We have to get. I don't know if we really can, but it'd be nice to get back to that. Maybe not in that situation, but to do some public service on behalf of the country and get involved in many ways. And I could go on a lot, but that'd take the whole rest of the interview to do that.
One of the things I think you need to be extremely proud of, Tom, is the Simulation Center. You started this amazing center at NYU. How did this come to pass? And tell us about financing. That you bring up finances.
Well, could I back up just a little bit, because it's an interesting thing, because I think that it really speaks to education, which is my real passion. And the simulation is one of the outgrowths of that. When I became chairman of surgery, it suddenly was a little frightening that I realized I had to suddenly teach all these medical students and residents. And when I started thinking about the process, about how we were teaching people, it was scary. Well, one of the things that's developed from that is an e-learning program that we are now using. We developed it at NYU, and I had the idea 8 years ago. And at this particular point in time, we have a whole series of teaching modules that are used in surgical clerkships around the country. Some are vascular, but a lot of general surgery too. And this is now being used in 86 medical schools across the country. So that was one of my first projects. The other part was building a surgical skills laboratory where we could teach people technical skills. So with those ideas, that's how I got the title to be the Dean for Education and Technology. When our new dean came in, he wanted me to head up a committee to develop a simulation center for NYU. And so I had a committee and we developed a plan, needed $10 million, and of course things stopped right there. But at the same time, City University of New York had received a $20 million grant to build a simulation center that was supposed to train first responders. The money came after 9/11.
Right.
They had the money, had no plan, didn't have a place to put it. We found a place to put it, and we had the plan, so it was a great marriage, and we got together with them. So it's their $20 million, NYU operates it, and that's how we got to do it.
Tremendous. This approach to training certainly seems to have changed the training and education in so many areas. Who exactly do you train there, Tom?
Boy, it's a lot of people, because of City University of New York is an enormous university. I don't know if you know, it's 250,000 students at CUNY. And NYU is probably the largest private university in the United States, so plenty of the students. Actually, we have 5 nursing schools, 2 medical schools, physician's assistants, respiratory therapists, emergency medical technicians, and all using the center for different times. But what we're most interested in is teaching team training and how all of these different disciplines work together. For example, we have a lot of training programs for labor and delivery, problems that come up there, shoulder dystocia, bleeding, maternal hemorrhage. We have, in the operating rooms that we have there, you probably saw, we're not teaching people technical aspects of surgery, that's done somewhere else, but we're teaching teams about how to respond to emergencies that might occur in the operating room. We bring the radiology teams in. What do they do when they have anaphylaxis from contrast media? A lot of neonatal training. So all of these teams that where people have to work in a very coordinated, efficient, timely manner to take care of an emergency problem. That's where you go to practice.
How do you know that this has been beneficial?
Well, it's hard to get data.
Right.
And as I can give you the example of flight trainers for pilots, which is very similar. I mean, how would we ever know for sure that the flight training that Sullenberger had was what enabled him to land that plane in the Hudson River in 6 minutes? We don't know, but on the other hand, it seemed like it probably was a good idea, and it probably did have something to do with it. Because those things are so rare, it's hard to measure the outcomes that way. Anecdotally, we've already had some wonderful stories where people in the pediatric cardiac intensive care unit actually were able to resuscitate a child that they probably would not have, in fact, had not done it the week before they had the training because of that training. So it's hard to get data, but I think everybody thinks it makes good sense.
Specifically, how is this being used to train vascular surgeons for endovascular surgery?
Well, this is not. We do, in the previous thing I built, the Surgical Skills Laboratory, we have a model where you can pass catheters and whatnot, and it's not used a lot. I think that that's always going to be something that they're going to have to learn more in the operating room.
Do you think all institutions can afford a simulation center?
Well, it's coming. It's coming. There must be 200 of them built around the country right now.
Really?
So it's pretty amazing. And I see more of them going up all the time. Maybe not quite as large as ours, but they're getting into it. It's coming down also from our regulatory agencies that are demanding that we do simulation. Malpractice insurance companies are dropping premiums because premiums if people have specific training, such as obstetrics. The ACGME now is getting into demanding that our first-year residents have simulation training to take care of the call. Even the American Board of Surgery is talking about having simulation as part of the board examination process. It's already being done in anesthesia, for example.
Terrific. The fourth area to discuss, Tom, is the future of vascular surgery. A few short years ago, your presidential address to the American Association for Vascular Surgery, I guess after the name was changed, you talked about the future of vascular surgery. You talked about the next quarter. What do you see happening?
Well, at that time, that was sort of what I envisioned as being the beginning of the third quarter of vascular surgery. Uh, Maybe the concept's a little vague, but the idea was in the 50s, when DeBakey and others were developing all those fantastic operations, that was a sudden growth spurt in vascular surgery. And then things leveled off for a while. The second quarter was more of a refinement, where we learned better when to do certain operations and so forth. And then I was seeing at the end of the 90s there that we were having another technological infusion into vascular surgery. That was when the endografts were coming out and all these new endovascular techniques. And I think it sort of revitalized vascular surgery at that time. And we're really seeing that. I mean, the meeting here today, you're seeing how many wonderful things are happening. And I think this is going to go along for a while, but I wouldn't be surprised then we'll have another plateau until the next technological change comes about.
Do you think vascular surgery can compete successfully against cardiology and interventional radiology regarding endovascular surgery?
They can. It's going to be harder because the technical advances that have come about have actually made things a lot easier than they used to be. All right?
It doesn't take a vascular surgery.
Right. It's a lot easier to fix an aneurysm, or it's a lot easier to put a stent in a femoral artery than it was to do those bypasses and things. So if that trend continues and we get better and better technology that makes things easier and easier, it's going to be hard to compete.
Do you think there's another Tom Fogarty out there?
Oh, yes.
Do you think there's another Tom Riles?
Oh, I'm sure of that. But
Let's talk a little bit about your mentors and what they meant to you and how you saw them. First, speak about Frank Spencer, who we were interviewing at your simulation center just a few months ago. Tell us about him.
Fantastic man, a great teacher. He was a good surgeon. I don't think that he was innovative like Dr. Cooley or Dr. DeBakey, but I think what I think about him the most is how he taught the proper ethics of surgery. And he was wonderful that way. And he also taught us how to think. What I mean by that is that bad things happen in surgery. And he could live with a bad outcome as long as you meticulously went through the event and thought about it, tried to analyze what the problems were, admit that you might have been able to do something better, and then if you really couldn't come to some conclusion, design a research project to try to make it better. So he was very methodical about all of that. On the other hand, if you went up and said, boy, that was bad outcome, she was an old lady and must have been her time, boy, you would be up there for 30 minutes getting dressed down because he would not tolerate that sort of thing. So that's what I mean by setting an ethical standard, which I think was remarkable.
Tony Imperato.
He technically was very good. I think a lot of his innovations in vascular surgery were way ahead of his time. He was the one that thought about doing, or didn't think about it, but popularized doing carotid surgery under local anesthesia. He was very good about trying to understand claudication and realizing that that was not necessarily a disease that was going to get worse, and popularized the idea that maybe these people could do just as well with exercise therapy, for example. So a lot of things like that, that he was a good thinker and a good technician.
Tell us some more about your dad, Ben Riles.
Yeah. Well, my dad, as I said, was a very much a general surgeon, and I had the chance to operate with him a few times as my career was starting and his was coming to an end. And I laugh about it a little bit because he would come to my operating room and watch me do carotid surgery. And his only relationship to it was that he remembered one time he had to ligate an external carotid artery for somebody who was bleeding from a tumor in his mouth. Otherwise, I had no idea what I was doing. And I would go to his operating room, and of course he was doing these things with general surgeries, and I would ask for the Metzenbaum scissors, and he didn't know what the Metzenbaum scissors were. The Mayo scissors was the only thing that he used, and he had a bunch of tools, and he did a great job with them. So he was a great doctor, and I think he was wonderful with patients. And I always enjoyed making rounds with him and seeing how he talked to people and addressed them.
Let's change gears a little bit and talk about your hobbies, specifically sailing.
Right.
How did this start?
Well, I've always liked the water. Imagine being raised in Fort Lauderdale and being in the Navy. Of course, the submarine, you don't see a lot of water. You're kind of in an iron tube there. But always liked being around the water. And fortunately, my wife does like sailing too. So, you start with a little boat and you get a bigger boat and a bigger boat. But
What's your favorite boat?
well, right now, my boat's a 40-foot sloop, and it's made by Sabre Company, and that's about all we can handle.
Can you handle it by yourself?
I have just to go for a distance, but I don't think it's a good idea. So, but with my wife and I, we sail it, and we'll sail it at night out in the Atlantic, and we've been out in some pretty rough weather too, but you'd need two people.
Have you ever sailed in the Chesapeake Bay?
No, I never have.
You need to do that.
I
for
know,
sure.
I want to.
What's your longest trip?
Going from Connecticut up to Maine. We're going to do that this summer. In fact, I'll be leaving in a couple of weeks.
How long does that take?
Oh, sailboats only go about 7 miles an hour, so that'll be about a 3 to 4 week effort. I'll take it up on a couple of weekends. I mean, technically, I could get up there in 4 days, but we enjoy the trip.
Tom, let's talk about some of your awards and publications. You've had massive awards, including the Distinguished Alumni Award from Baylor. You were president of the Peripheral Vascular Society, and as I mentioned before, ISCVS. You've had teaching awards at every single level. Publications have been enormous, 178 articles, books, book chapters, at least 80. With all this recognition and accomplishment, looking back, do you ever think, why did this happen to you? There were just as many energetic, bright, young guys who wanted to travel around the country and get trained. Why did this happen to Tom Riles?
Just because I like to do it. I can't say anything else. In fact, as you mentioned that, it's hard in my own mind to think that I was involved in a lot of those things. But everything was fun, and just did it because I thought it was fun.
Did you ever fail? With all these accomplishments, were you ever disappointed, fail? And what was your response to failure?
Yes, I have, and I think that the response is like a lot of things, whether it's surgery or some job that you have or something like that. I think that you have to reflect on it. This is a Frank Spencer in me.
Right.
And reflect on it and analyze it and figure out what you need to do better and then move on. But not to get bitter or blame people for your failures. I think you have to look at yourself.
If you can't blame other people, Tom, you'll never be a good politician. Talk for a moment about time management. As you and I have discussed before, we all have a certain amount of time, and how you prioritize and utilize that time is critical to how much you can actually accomplish. How do you go about time management, and why have you been so successful keeping so many balls in the air at one time?
I don't know, Roger. You asked me that, and it's hard to know. I think that a lot of it is working with a lot of other good people, too. You can't do all of that by yourself. And as you know, a lot of those articles have lots of names on them, and the jobs have lots of people working with you. And I think the key is trying to work with other people to accomplish things. That I don't think any one of those things was ever me alone. It was always with a team.
Well, that's being very modest, but I think also hard work had a lot to do with this, wouldn't you say?
Well, there's a lot of hard work with it, but I think that also I'm very devoted family man, and I obviously have my recreational activities I like to do, and I think those things are important. And I'm glad that I didn't spend every minute of my time trying to do work in vascular surgery. I think that would have missed out a lot in life.
Right. Finally, we have a round of questions, Tom, that is just seeking your opinion.
Okay.
Independent Board of Vascular Surgery. As you know, a number of leaders in vascular surgery were very focused in this and thought that it was crucial for us to do. In fact, a vote of the membership of SVS passed and encouraged independence, and yet it failed. Why?
Well, I mean, there's some technical reasons to get a board organized. I won't go into that, but I think from my point of view, I think we all wanted the same goal, and that was independence, but that's a little bit different than an independent board of vascular surgery. And I think that the differences of opinion were primarily how, not what the goal was, but how we were going to get there.
Right.
And one view was to sort of take, in-your-face type of approach, and that caused a lot of conflict, I think. And the other way is to kind of keep chipping away with it until you get the independence that you need to do your job that you want to do.
Has that occurred?
I think it has. I really don't know what else we would want at this particular point. We able to run our own programs. We're able to write our own exams, do all the things. It's hard for me to name one thing that the American Board of Surgery won't let us do at this particular point in time.
You think that's because of the effort to establish an independent board, that's their
It's a good
subliminal response?
It could have been. It could have been. And I have to give credit to Dr. Veith and the people who took that point of view, because that certainly made it easier for those that negotiate, right? If you have a good Department of Defense, it makes the Department of State much easier to operate.
Endovascular surgery, what role do you think this is going to have in the future for vascular surgery?
Well, it's obviously pretty much taken over vascular surgery at this particular point, but I think it's going to be critical. We're going to see many new developments in treating vascular disease, and I think that there always will be a certain technical component to it, whether we start applying medicines directly to plaques, something like that, but there will be some technical component to both the diagnosis as well as the treatment. So, and it's always going to be getting to less and less invasive procedures, which means more and more endovascular type procedures.
And finally,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to young vascular surgeons that are coming out today?
Oh, I think it's an exciting time. I think it's a wonderful time. Learn all you can and embrace new technologies and evaluate for yourself if they're good or they're bad. But I think it's exciting. But the important thing is to realize that whatever we are teaching them at this particular point of time is probably going to be obsolete in 10 years. And they shouldn't think that that's the end of it, because in our lifetime, things have changed many, many times. Few of the operations that we started doing many years ago still exist, and it's all been replaced by other things. So that will happen forever.
Tom, thank you for your time. And
Well, Roger, thank you very much. It was wonderful. I appreciate you asking me to do this.